Hi, and welcome to a reading of The Second Dimension, written by Matias De Stefano In, presented by me, your friend and fellow seeker Alex. I hope you enjoy, and without further ado, let's get into it. When you said yesterday that Piscean consciousness is like a wise child, I started thinking about the way children have to understand the world, the way we learn to recognize it since we are children, through play, fun, discovery, and something that amazes me even more is the most of what we see as children is not real, but imagined. In other words, when we observe things with a child's mind, everything is magical, is in a magical adventure. Anything can be the subject of imagination, of creating a story with the mind. I remember seeing bricks and playing with them as if they were a castle or a ship. I remember seeing a tree and thinking that it was a city, and the insects that lived there doing amazing things. I remember feeling that the moon spoke to me, or that each object in my house had its own life and communicated with me, with which he was never alone. From the towels in the bathroom to the dining room table, the living room of the house became landscapes of the world, and the sofa was a ship. The pencils were space rockets, and the curb in the street with its flagstones could be the ridges of alien planets with unique geographies. When we grow up, we tend to lose this capacity for imagination. We begin to base ourselves on what we know about the world, and a slab, a sofa, a table, a moon, a tree become that, simply a slab, a sofa, a table, a moon, and a tree. I find it a bit sad. At the edge of the sidewalk in the street with its flagstones could be, thinking about what this sidewalk in the street could be with its flagstones. You actually keep imagining things, but they start to get more complex. A child is learning about matter. He is a newcomer to this reality, and therefore his consciousness is capable of molding it. Since he continues to live in the subtle, but experiencing matter, playing with its metamorphic capabilities. When you become a teenager, you begin to mold your soul, your energy, and you begin to use your imagination to develop different options for what you live, to idealize people, to feed illusions, putting together emotional stories. You already know the subject, you no longer are excited about it. Now you are excited about people and what you feel for them, what they provoke in you, falling in love, getting excited, fantasizing. When you're an adult and you have already met many people, you have already related to various aspects of the soul. You already know what all this means, and the soul no longer excites you. You already lose the magical interest that you had over people, and you begin to focus on the mind, on advancing in life, and having a purpose. And you're excited about faith, belief, philosophy, power, control, the intellectual. You're excited about what you can innovate in your life, what you can achieve with projects, until you get out of your mind and begin to live old age. In old age, you become excited about matter again, recognizing that you are on the way to leaving it. And you're excited to play again, and you find yourself being able to do new things, discovering new places, until you get excited about love, with relationships, with the feeling that something to end life with an illusion of imagining what will happen later when you are gone. And your soul no longer excites you. You already lose the magical interest that you had over people, and you begin to focus on the mind, on advancing in life. And you are deluded by faith, belief, philosophy, the power, the control, the intellectual. So it's as if illusion and imagination never left the human. It only transforms. It goes from one level to another. It's just that we live in a separate way, as if abandoning what was before. The human problem is that it considers the past stepped on. The human believes that if he has already lived something, that it is no longer useful, as if it were not a record of his experience. When you ride a bike as a child, you will always know how to ride a bike, no matter how old you are later on. And maybe in your life, you will never pick up another bike and ride it. Maybe you use motorcycles, cars, or planes. And yet, this doesn't mean you can't one day pick up a bike and ride it. The human concept that what happened in past is no longer useful, necessary, or even considered childish to return to only separates our potentials, limiting you. A person open to using a bicycle, a motorcycle, a car, a boat, a plane, or whatever is a person who expands, who sees the infinity of potentials and paths that his being is capable of tracing, of creating and experiencing. In the same way, an adult who is capable of deluding himself with his soul by falling in love and imagining the infinite possibilities. Walking through an airport imagining that it is another planet and is traveling between worlds and dimensions with extraterrestrial companions, and at the same time nurturing himself from the imagination to build a social project that gives him hope. He is a multidimensional being. It's what they say to see the world through the eyes of a child. When you are a child, look at the world as a child. When you are a teenager, look at the world as a teenager child. When you are an adult, look at the world with the teenage adulthood of a child. And when you are old, look at the world as a teenage adult who lives the old age of his childhood. If you live life stage by stage, abandoning the previous one, you will not gain expandability, but will limit yourself to a new way of seeing the world. I must then open myself up to options. I must add them as if they were one. The universe is a constant of options that are one, and this is the key to the second dimension. I understand that the second dimension is the one made up of lines and points that form a drawing on a single plane without depth. That is like a cartoon on television or a drawing in a book. That's right. That itself is dimension 2. It arises at the moment that Alpha and Omega begin the northern and southern hemispheres, positive and negative, from a point to the first dimension. Separate project themselves in opposite directions, creating a line, but which in turn, its new nodes create a new polarity, which they also extend, seeking to close the image to find balance. A polar axis by itself is not balanced. It needs to close the circuit, and so you can get a closed polar image in simple words. From one line you get a square. In the first dimension we call it a line. In the second dimension we call it a square. And in the third dimension we call it a cube. And in the fourth dimension you call it a tesseract. And in the fifth, convergence. And in the sixth, foundation. And in the seventh, manifestation. In the eighth, process. And in the ninth, realization. As you will see, the first dimension is one that gives the greatest freedom, because beyond its polarization, a line can be used for the manifestation of any other type of figure. But be it a triangle to create a tetrahedron, or a pentagon to create a dodecahedron, however it is the second dimension that provides the basis for the realization of everything else, that determines the following patterns. And why is that? Because in the second is where you find consciousness. The second is the one that gives you the idea of the rest, the one that shows you the basis of the imagination. Duality is a gestator of probabilities. Your mind, polarized in the axis of the first dimension, gives rise to the attention to move for love. And in the second, it incorporates it, the soul, the articulated movement, the magical intention. So think about cartoons, like you said. They are the imaginative manifestation, the embodiment of dreams, the basis of illusion. Part of the creation game. Think of Cosmos as a girl who decides to move in circles, turning in his room like a dervish in a constant circles in which he sees the world change around him, understanding other forms of himself, idealizing reality, imagining a new one. The drawing, the strokes, they are the basis of all art, be it poetry by tracing a word from its first letter, or sculpture, whether it be to trace the initial design, or the plaster, or the rock. The lines make up the neural connections of your soul, shaping the perception of your environment, outlining it, but at the same time giving you the freedom to create the foundations of infinity. Something so simple ends up being something so beautiful. Each line is a process which you draw in your walk. Your two eyes observe this dimensionality, which is traced in your two hands. In your two ears and your 2 feet, you are a dual being made up of the patterns of duality. Your presence in the third dimension is due to the foundations of your second dimension, and there you find the basis of your imagination. Each process that you live is a path traced in the illusion, designed by the second dimension, in which you position yourself at point X to advance to point Y, designing the paths through illusion and imagination. Since point Y is the illusionary mirage of yourself, it is an image that needs to be completed with your experience. For this reason, you should not abandon the previous step, but add, because only then can you obtain the complete image. The imagination that creates the patterns, the illusion that determines my life, is not then a prison of my mind, but precisely what allows me to expand it. I know that you have lived conditioned by the reality of the third dimension, in which you have heard phrases such as, do not live by illusions, stop imagining and live reality, put your feet on the ground. But the truth is that there would be no life, no reality, and no ground without the imagination and illusions. Everything is a holographic illusion, so if you really want to live fully in this reality, you better dare to imagine and get excited. And doing so will allow you to find the unconditionality of your soul, which manifests from dreams and everything that can be. Unconditionally loving what I am capable of imagining projects unconditionality to the world I live in. Sometimes utopias become reality, only if you dare to live your dreams, tracing them step by step. I imagine, and the illusion becomes life. Awaken the dreamer within you.